Welcome to the Vancouver True Crime podcast. This is episode 5, Vancouver, the Beautiful and Ugly. So this series has definitely been my most popular series that I've done. And I appreciate that because these are my personal stories. They take me back to a time and a place where I really enjoyed the city of Vancouver. I really enjoyed what it had to offer, corks and all. It was a beautiful place, a magical place to live. I have fond memories of Vancouver of that time. So in this stage of my life, I'm going to start about the 2000s, where I left off with my toxic girlfriend, Elizabeth. In the last podcast, you might have heard me call her Susan a couple of times. Susan was her stage name, and we had this kind of inside joke where I called her Susan. Like when she would go off to work, I'd say, "Bye, Susan." When she'd come home with her bag and all her stripping gear, I was like, "How was your day, Susan?" And it kind of stuck sometimes. I would call her Susan. Susan was her stage name. So I just want to clear that up. I was listening to it, and sometimes I record these quite late at night. Like right now, it is 12:04 a.m. So there's a lot that happened in my life between Susan and the 2000s. Obviously, that relationship didn't work out. How could it? And I decided to take a job where I had to travel. It was a job that I'm glad I did take. I got to travel all through the province of BC, all through Vancouver Island, got to see all the interior province. Then I was in Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and I enjoyed getting to see the rest of Canada. Big country. Gave me perspective. I'm going to unpack that trip. It was about a year and a half long. It's a lot to unpack. A lot of stuff, a lot of things that went on. And then, around, I think about 2000-ish, Kevin was in and out of jail quite a bit. And from what I remember, he did 2 armed robberies, and he was serving a 5-year sentence for that. He didn't really resurface until about 2006, and then he died approximately about 2 years after that from a drug overdose. The drugs finally got him. So that's basically what happened to Kevin. Kevin's life spiraled. People ask me a lot. I get a lot of DMs about Kevin. And one day, as a listener requested, I will do an episode just on Kevin because there is so much material. Without further ado, let's get into this episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my crazy podcast. Thank you again. 2000. I needed a change. I was traveling for approximately almost 2 years straight. I was exhausted mentally. I traveled from Victoria, BC, right across Canada to Halifax, Nova Scotia. I was burnt out from being in a different hotel room almost every night of the week, in a different bed, in a different town or a city. And I was glad to be home, happy to be back in Vancouver. But at this stage of my life, I fundamentally needed a change in my life. I'm in my late 20s now, getting close to 30 years old. And the roaring 20s of partying and nightclubs and all that, I wanted to put behind me. The internet was becoming a thing. I used the internet pretty successfully already in around 98 for promos and marketing and things like that, so I was quite well aware of it and saw the power of it immediately. And I had a lot of interest in that. I decided that I was going to take graphic design, Photoshop, Illustrator. At the time, there was a program called Flash that was really popular, an animation program. I took that. And, different programming languages like HTML, JavaScript at the time, and, basic, computer languages to make websites. So I took my classes at nighttime so I could sleep in and I could stay up late working on my projects and my assignments and stuff. I've always been kind of a late night person, even now, making podcasts, 12 midnight till 5 a.m. At nighttime, I feel the most creative. I feel relaxed. The house is quiet. In my case, the kids are in bed. So I like doing projects at night. I'm a night person, as you probably can tell. And during the day, I'd go work out. I would do my chores, things like that. But, I started doing online dating. Now, online dating was very different, obviously, from meeting people in nightclubs. And nightclubs, at least most of the times, is what you see is what you get. And plus, you have alcohol that makes you feel fearless. And it's the opposite of meeting people in nightclubs. Online is almost like you don't really know what you're getting. It's a bit of a, and sometimes it can be a downright, dangerous, especially for women. And even myself, I've been in some pretty hairy situations from a person I met online, which I'm going to get into in this episode. So I've been on some pretty horrible dates from people I met online. One of the worst dates I've ever been on there was a few of them, but one of the worst. It was hard to tell what she looked like in her picture. It was really fuzzy. And remember, this is early, 2000s. There's no Plenty of Fish. There's no profile. Generally, you were meeting people on message boards and MSN little chat rooms. So this woman, she told me that she was worked in an architectural firm. Sounds like a pretty impressive job. Downtown, worked at this fancy architectural firm. And as a hobby, she was into rock climbing. Now, I've never done any significant kind of rock climbing, needing equipment, that kind of stuff. I've done hiking and things like that, and maybe scaled where I had to use my hands a little bit. But when I think rock climber, professional rock climbers, that's what she said, do these competitions, and she would go on and on about it. We'd chat about it online. So I would believe that someone who did rock climbing at a professional level would be in amazing physical shape. Just it would take a lot of strength from the things that she was saying. And then, we talked on the phone, and I couldn't really get a read on her. I'm pretty good at reading people, but I couldn't really get a read. Like, she was kind of like distracted all the time. And I thought, well, maybe she's busy. And also, you got to remember, this whole online dating thing is pretty new for me too. And, she didn't have a bad phone voice, but it's kind of funny now thinking about it. My mom had an amazing phone voice. She'd be snarling and yelling at me, and then the phone would ring and be like, "Oh, hello." So this woman had a, nice sounding voice. And I think we talked for about a good 2 weeks, either online or on the phone. So finally, we were going to go on a date. And she said, well, maybe we can, just you come by my place, chill for a bit, and then we'll go out for dinner. Go to a pub or something like that, right? Something, okay, cool. It was a nice day. We could probably go to a pub with a nice patio. So I asked her, well, where do you live? Because remember, architectural firm downtown Vancouver, world-class rock climber. Well, this was the first red flag. She lived in Whalley in Surrey. Now, not really trying to be too hard on Whalley, but Whalley's a pretty rough area. Not as rough as Hastings Street, but it's it's up there. High crime, high poverty, a lot of street drug activity, street prostitution, especially back then. So I was like, oh, Whalley. Wow, okay, cool. But hey, you know what? We were talking for 2 weeks and, seemed pretty decent, had a good job. I'm thinking, wow, she must be in great shape if she's, such a good rock climber. So I get to the apartment. It's on Whalley Ring Road. It's like a 3-story walk-up apartment. I don't remember if it had an elevator. It might have. Really old building. You open it up. The whole building smells like wet dog smell, mildewy. Old 70 paisley psychedelic looking carpet that's dark colors, wood, browns, oranges. So the apartment, I was starting to feel a little sketched out. She's on the 3rd floor. Get to her apartment and building's pretty shady. Opens the door and I'm thinking, oh, this must be her mother. The woman is 50 years old. She's approximately 5 feet tall. She's wearing spandex bicycle shorts, and she weighs about 300 pounds. And her hair and her facial features, she actually looks like one of those troll dolls. And she seems so happy to see me, and I'm just like, whoa, and I don't know what to do. I'm in shock. So I go in hesitantly. I'm sitting on the couch and she's just going on and on. I'm like, oh, you're into rock climbing? And she just with a straight face, oh yeah. I go, well, do you have any pictures? Oh, they're at my ex-boyfriend's house. We had a breakup and all my rock climbing stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. And a roommate then knocks on the door. He comes in. He looks like a full-out crackhead, right? And they go off in the bedroom by themselves, and they're having this intense whispering argument. And I'm just thinking, okay, how the hell do I get out of this situation? How do I get out of it, And then she comes back and says, oh, I know this is really awkward to ask, but I got laid off my architectural firm job. I'm like, oh yeah, but that bullshit job you told me about for the last 2 weeks. And I was wondering if you have $100. I'm just a little short for rent. And I'm just like, wow, I haven't even been inside for 3 minutes. And she's hitting me up for $100. And I'm probably going to go right to crack or drugs or whatever. So I just said, you know what? I hate to say this, but I don't think this is going to work out, It's like, and she's like, oh, why? I go, well, you're kind of hitting me up for money, and we just met. And then the boyfriend or roommate, whoever he was, comes out, and he's all giving me dirty looks. Like, well, how about 40 then? So you remember, I'm in a weird apartment. And I just said, you know what? Whatever. Here, I got 20. Here's $20. And the guy literally snatches that out of my hand and he's out the door. And I'm just like, okay, you know what? Like, I gotta go. I'm sorry. And then I just got the hell out of there. So that was one of my first weird experiences. And it gets worse than this, trust me. The next lady I met, she was an older woman, which, if you listen to my last podcast, you know I've had some experience with older women. She was in her 40s, and she lived on Beach Avenue. And we actually met a couple of times, and she was really nice, kind of a classy lady. And I met her on English Bay. She had a apartment, but it was a big apartment. It's like it's like a 5-story building, and each floor is a whole flat, a whole apartment on each floor. And she was on the 3rd floor, like really expensive. Her husband was in the oil industry, and he died in some kind of industrial accident, and she got this massive insurance payout. And she was into working out. Sound familiar? She was into working out. And we actually got along. We went out for lunch a couple of times. We went out for sushi. And I would meet her at English Bay quite a few times. But this something was a little bit off. So one day we decide we're going to go for drinks. And it was nothing happened to this point yet. And we started drinking at a pub. And then we went to the Sutton place, which is on Burrard. It's a nice hotel, but it has a really nice lounge in there. I used to like going there back in the day. So we're at the Sutton place, and she's just like, okay, you're coming back to my place now. So we take a cab, go back to her place, and it's on. Like, she just gets, as soon as we walk in the door, she's right naked and really aggressive. Like, and she's in good shape. Like, this woman actually has a 6-pack, because that's all she does all day is work out and run and Pilates and yoga and stuff. So she's actually, in incredible shape. And, I feel like I am not having sex. I'm having Roman Greco wrestling with this woman. It's almost kind of exhausting, actually, because she's just so, like, aggressive. And, it's like, that's what it felt like. It felt like more like actual wrestling. And then I need a break. I gotta go to the bathroom. I go into her bathroom. And in her sink, there are about 5 or 6 massive dildos in the sink, like massive ones being washed. And I'm just like, oh my God, like those are humongous. And I go back in the bedroom and I said, whoa, those are huge dildos in there. And she just laughs, like this cackle, lets out this cackle, goes, don't worry, they don't take out the garbage. It's made some kind of joke like that, right? So I was, and then after the night, I spent the night, and then in the morning she said to me, she goes, I'm going on this cruise with my friend. We're going to go on this European cruise. And then when I come back, I'd like to date you, and I'll break up. This is what her exact words were. I will break up with the other 30 guys that I'm seeing because I like you. And I'm like, well, have a great European trip. I'll see you when I get back, which I didn't see. And just, if you go back to the last podcast, a bunch of dudes in the background, I've already been there, done that. And then I had a whole batch of these. And I don't mean to sound like super harsh, but these people are pure scumbags. So there are people, maybe due to mental illness or whatever, that are delusional, right? And, just like the woman who said that she was a professional rock climber, but she's 300 pounds, and looking at her physical ability. There's just no way that this 305-foot person would be able to hang from a little tiny rope and scale up a 100-foot cliff. It's just impossible. Right? That's delusional. And I don't even really have anger towards delusional. I don't. It's just, you almost feel sorry for them. Maybe this woman, the rock climber, the crack rock climber, I don't know. I'm just trying to make a parallel with rock, crack cocaine, they call it rock, and she's a rock climber. Who knows? I don't know. Some weird, I don't know. Anyways. That's in that case, I don't really have any anger. I feel a little annoyed that my time got wasted. This person, you're spending time on the phone and back and forth messages, and it kind of eats up a lot of time. That's one thing I detested about online dating, the endless emailing or messages, right? Can waste a lot of time. And then when you meet the person, there's either zero chemistry, or they're not what they say they are, or they're delusional. Well, this class of people, I'm not going to say they're delusional because there's something a little bit different going on. They're people that have given up on actually meeting someone. They're not using the dating apparatus, online apparatus, to meet someone. But what they're doing is they're using it to their advantage. So there's women that have, and I've ran across this, that, you get a little bit into the conversation and you find out they're a working girl, and they'll be up front. Hey, you know what? If you come over and you have $200 or whatever, we can do this or that. And never really was into that, but at least these women would tell you, right? So you know what you're getting. Right? They're being honest. So I don't fault them for that. It would be brutal if they met a guy, did a bunch of stuff, and then, here's a bill, big boy. Then that's not cool, right? But what these women do, in my experience, I coined the term professional dater. So they're not working girls. They use the trappings of dating, and they're good at emailing. It's probably the messages, it's probably most of it's copy and paste. The stock answers that people ask when you're dating, when you're, hey, what do you do, where are you from, where did you grow up, what are your hobbies and interests, what's your favorite movie or your food, and blah blah blah, right? So you go all through that with these people. They always send you a picture that's about 20 to 15 to 10 years old if you're lucky. You're lucky if you get a 10-year-old picture. But what they do is they manipulate it so you're meeting them for the first time at a movie theater or at a nice restaurant or wherever they want. And when you get there, you're like, okay, don't look anything like your picture, and it's apparent they have zero interest in you. They just don't barely talk to you. They'll talk about the menu. I think I'm going to get the halibut and the garlic mashed potatoes, and I'm going to get a piece of cheesecake. And anything you say, it's just like, yeah, that's nice. Like, you there's no way in hell that you would go on a second date, because it's just apparent that they're actually just using you to go out for dinner, or just, there's a difference between you go on a date and there's no chemistry, but the intent was from both parties was to see if you like each other. And just because you go on a date, I don't expect the person to like me, but there's a sincerity. And with this, there's no sincerity. I for movies and restaurants, and some of them are better at it than others. Like, some are just blatant, some are just blatant. Other ones are like, they put out a little bit of effort, but not a lot. And then, because as soon as the date's over, they're just like, okay, well, it was nice meeting you. And, it's like I said, it really walks on a fine line, and it's brutal. And I got really good at screening those out, So there's those. And then to make this podcast, I was thinking, what is the worst date that I ever been on? And I've been on some pretty bad ones. Hopefully there's not some woman out there saying, oh, I went on this date with this Mark guy, and oh, it was horrible. So hopefully, that's not the case for somebody. So again, it was not sure if she was a pro dater or not, but she kind of fit that category. We talked on the phone for quite a bit. I asked her lots of questions. She seemed kind of interested in me and blah, 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 and all the stuff I was into. And we went on this date. We went to Earl's on Broadway in Granville area, that one. And I get there, and sure, she shows up, and she looks 30 years older than what her picture looked like. And I said to her, she recognized me right away because I gave her a picture, and she sits down. And I said to her, I go, oh, wow, like how old was that picture? She goes, oh, this woman looked like in her mid-40s. She sent me a picture from when she was 15 years old. And I'd first instinct, I wanted just to jump up and leave, but it's like crowded, and she was actually late. I already had a few drinks in me. So I was thinking, you know what? For comedy's sake, let's just see where this goes. So she sits down. She goes, oh, what are you drinking? Oh, I'm having a martini. Oh, great. I'll have one of those. She puts her hand up. Waiter comes by. I'm drinking a crantini. She goes, oh, I'll have one of those. Waiter would drop the crantini right in front of her, and I'm not kidding. She would pick it right up and just shoot it back. Like a 3-ounce martini, vodka crantini. She would shoot it back like a shooter and order another one. She did that 4 times in a row, and I'm just like, whoa. So we finally get her table. We order a bottle of wine. Now she is doing shots of wine. She will fill up her glass and gulp. And I'm just watching and marvel, like, you're going to get pissed drunk. And in between her shots of alcohol, she had these really intense aqua green eyes. And I remember why I liked her picture, because in her picture she sent me, and remember, she was 15 years old, right? But it was a close-up of her face, and she had really these intense, really greeny, intense green eyes. Well, she still had the green eyes, but and I said to her, I said, back to the photo and stuff. So you were 15? Like, don't you have a more recent picture? She goes, yeah, but this is what she said. Since she took that picture when she's 15, she's gained 100 pounds. I'm like, oh, okay. So why don't you use a picture of what you look like, right? So this went over her head. So I'm actually putting her not a pro dater, but delusional. So she's just pounding the alcohol back, and the whole conversation from the time she sat down to all through our dinner, she's talking about how her mother got a flesh-eating disease, some disease, a MRSA, and she's going on and on about how unclean hospitals are, and she's like an expert in this flesh-eating disease. She knows every angle and everything there is to know about flesh eating. And trust me, when you're on a date, I don't really want to be thinking about flesh eating disease. And she's just going on and on about it, and I'm kind of amused. The date is so horrible, and I just sort of like, you just have your hands up in the air, and I said, hey, do you want to do some tequila shots? So we ordered some tequila, and she's just going on and on about flesh eating disease. So I pay the bill, and it's almost like the whole bill is almost booze. I think we ended up ordering, I ordered an appetizer because I didn't really have an appetite from getting bombarded from flesh-eating disease all through the date. And also, too, she was a tall woman. She was big. Like, she was, I'm 6 feet tall. I actually think in her heels, she was probably 6'1" or 6'2". Like, she was a big woman, like tall and big shoulders and, hefty woman. And I remember when I stood up and she stood up at the same time, she was wearing the most putrid, like god-awful formaldehyde perfume that just, as drunk as I got now, because remember, I had crantinis, I had wine, and I had tequila shots, and I think I had a couple of beers in there. Oh my God, I felt like I could throw up. Just like the combination of her vicious, nasal assaulting perfume and the mixture of alcohol. So I'm just like, whoa. Like, I felt like a wave of nausea. And then she's like really into like, she's one of those talkers that likes to get really close. And then she's like, hey, I want to ask you something. And I'm like, sure. She goes, you want to play some pool? And there was this pool hall right across the street on Broadway. This is, if you're not from Vancouver, but yeah, Broadway is a big, busy street. There was a pool hall right across from the Earls on Broadway. And she goes, oh, let's go play some pool. I'm thinking, hey, what could go wrong playing some pool? Sure, let's go play some pool. Well, remember all that alcohol, all that booze that she had, and we're going to the pool hall, and she's being like super loud and really aggressive, and she's just like cranking the balls, and the balls are like going off the floor, like boom, like like she'd hit the balls so hard that they just go flying off the table, and the people are getting really pissed off. And she gets in an argument with one of the other pool players at the table, and she sticks the pool cue between her legs, and she's wearing a pantsuit. That's right, she was wearing a pantsuit, and she's a big woman, and she has this pool stick between her legs, and she's like shaking it like, it's like in a male appendage. And she says to the guy, why don't you suck my dick? Right? And I'm just like, okay, we gotta go. We're gonna get kicked out of here, right? So we leave, right? And she's all going on about that effing bastard. I should wait out here in cold car. Like, she literally wanted to fight the guy, and she probably would have won. So I get her a cab, and I thank her for such a lovely evening and educating me on flesh-eating disease. So that was possibly the worst date I've been on. I've been on a lot of ones that are close to that, but that one stands out to me as the worst date I've ever been on. The people that I seem to be the most disturbed by, again, I honestly don't care what people do in their bedrooms as long as it's involved kids and it's consensual. But I have some weird thing against swingers, not because I don't care that they're swinging. It's just been my experience with them. I've had so many odd, gross encounters with swingers. And I remember I was with some friends. We went to Kobe's Steakhouse, a Japanese steakhouse on Alberni Street. So this one I didn't meet these swingers online. It was at the Kobe Steakhouse. So I'm sure if it's still open, pandemic-wise or whatever, that first of all, the place needs to be renovated. It hasn't been renovated since the 70s. I'm just going to throw that out there. Anyways, so how it happens is this: you go there, you're all stuffed into a waiting room that's kind of overcrowded, and then they call you to a table, and everyone sits at a table, and you have a Japanese chef that does all the tricks and volcano onions and drinks the sake, and it's all entertaining, and it's kind of fun the first few times. But anyways, so I'm at Kobe Steakhouse, so we're stuffed in this waiting area, and there's this woman who's just staring, just really intense. And it's a little uncomfortable because, one, I don't find her attractive. She's 50 years old. She has the feather. She almost has the hockey hair. The hockey hair is when you have almost like a mullet well, I don't know if all hockey players still have this, but the stereotype hockey hair is kind of like the mullet with the feather in the front and feathered hair in the front, and then kind of the mullet. So she has kind of like a mullet. And the guy looks like this, I don't know, just weird. He's really tall, skinny, big mustache, and he just keeps looking at me, smirking, this weird smirk, right? And I'm just ignoring them. Once in a while, this kind of awkward smile, and sure enough, they're at our fucking table. And his wifey is right beside me, and she's like, every chance she gets, like, she moves her arm, and I get a little touchy, and this and that, and her legs or thighs, because, the table, you're kind of crowded in there, right? There's a big table, they try to push a lot of people in there. I got the very end, which I hated. I'm at the very end, and she's right beside me, and then her husband. And every so often, I get a little, happen to catch eye contact with the husband, and it's just like, ugh. And sure enough, I go to the bathroom, and then her husband is right at the bathroom door as I'm coming in. Goes, "Hey, can I talk to you?" I take a deep breath. I'm like, "Oh, sure, what's going on?" "My wife really likes you." "Oh, okay. Oh, that's nice." Like, "Oh, great. She likes me. That's nice. So, we're from out of town." I feel like saying, "Yeah, I figured that one out." Right? "We have a hotel, and, we like to party sometimes. We've been together for about 30 years. And I'm just like, I just look at him really deadpan. I'm like, "Oh, sorry, dude. I don't party. I'm clean. I'm sober." Yet I'm drinking like a fish at the table. It was the only thing I could think of at the time, right? And he's like, "Oh, are you sure? Are you sure? Well, think about it," right? So I go back to the table. Now it's awkward as hell. And the woman's out. Now she's about 4 or 5 sakis in. Her little sake cups, little shots of sake. She has about 4 or 5 of those in her system, and she's just smiling and her crooked teeth, and just like, I just got the F out of there, right? So I've had a lot of these really awkward situations. I don't know what it is. It's always like this really awkward encounter. I've had about, again, I traveled across Canada from Victoria, BC, all the way to Halifax. Every little bar, nightclub, it was a nightclub entertainment. I've had a lot of people that are into swinging, and wives and husbands come up to me. It's always the same thing. "Oh, my wife likes you, and he doesn't want to join in. He just wants to watch." So it's just sort of like, it's happened before, and I've always turned it down. It's not my thing. Like, maybe if they were super attractive, there'd be a possibility, but in my case, they never were, right? And there was another situation like that, almost identical. There's a pub. It's called Lennox Pub on Granville Street. Same thing. I was drinking beer, sitting at the awkward looking woman smiling at me the whole time. Goofy looking cross-eyed dude comes up to me with a pot belly. "My wife likes you." I'm like, "Oh, isn't that nice? Okay. We're in town. We have a hotel room. Do you want to come and party with us?" Yeah, no thank you. So, which takes me to the weirdest person I possibly ever dated. So again, around this time, right, I'm back in Vancouver. It's like I'm a little bored, I've been used to like traveling quite a bit, and on this online dating has just been like, my batting average has been terrible. I got together with a few cougars. There was this one lady with a blue Stingray, and she was hilarious, man. Like, she would pick me up and her Corvette Stingray, take me right back to her place. She would make me do yard work, cut her grass, manly chores around the house, and then she'd make me dinner, and then I'd get rewarded later on. That scenario happened a few times, but I definitely had to work for it, right? And the whole time she would just bitch about her ex-husband, what a loser he was. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, right? So there was that adventure. So once in a while I would, I picked up a few bad habits by this stage in my life. So because I was going to nightclubs a lot, I was around a lot of alcohol, and I wasn't really a big drinker, but I was starting at around this time to binge drink. And I wouldn't drink a lot, but then when I would, it would be like shots and crazy cocktails, mixing liquor, wine, tequila, beer, and then, you get pretty wasted doing that, right? So I was going out quite a bit. Plus, a lot of the times I was up late at night. So I was used to being up late at night. When I was going to school, because I didn't go to school during the day, I would sleep in. And if I didn't really have any pressing assignments or whatever, I'd sleep in, right? So I had the opportunity to always sleep off bad hangovers. E was a big thing around this time. And I met a woman who was possibly one of the kookiest, fascinating women I've ever met in my life. Kind of scary. She was an alpha she-wolf. She had a really nice place downtown Vancouver, like really nice. It was probably a 3-4 bedroom condo. Like, it was big. It was a big place. It had a big loft in there, and she was a strange woman. She was European. I didn't really know where she was from. She was kind of had a vague about her background. She spoke a few languages, German, Italian, a few others. She brought me to a lot of parties, a lot of crazy parties with really rich people, really nice parties. One of the most fascinating parties I've ever been to in my life was this house in West Vancouver. It was a beautiful house. Like, probably in this market, it would easily be a 10, 12, maybe $14 million house. It was huge. Like 9 bedrooms, had a dance floor. It was on the water in West Vancouver, had a dock, like just gorgeous house. And I remember those people were actually Bulgarian, but they were actually really cool. Like, most of the parties she took me to, they were kind of weird, snobby, and a lot of the times I felt so out of my element, just completely out of my element. Well, this woman was a chemist, and she had a very advanced degree in chemistry, and she would make her own ecstasy or combine it with other drugs. And she made absinthe, which is very powerful alcohol. It's like 70% alcohol, but it's fermented in this herb called wormwood that has a very psychedelic type of effect, and it's a dark green color, and usually pour it over a sugar cube. So usually the night with her started off drinking this stuff, and you get completely blasted off to another planet. And then she'd hand you all these weird pills, and you'd be in another world. Anyways, she took me to this party. It was in West Vancouver, gorgeous house, right? These people were actually cool, but no one F around with them. They definitely had, like, people you don't F with, and I've been around people like that, but they were cool. Of all the weird parties she took me, they were the only ones that were kind of like, hey, come over here, man, have some beer, and they were cool. Like, they were very hospitable to you, right? The other parties was just people that looked completely like weirdos, and would just kind of stare at you like, who are you? Like, you get the idea. So anyways, she would make these concoctions, And usually when I would leave her place, she would hand me a bag. Here, take this home, give this to your friends or whatever, right? And this, I remember one time, I have no idea what it was. I'm just going to assume it had ecstasy. It definitely had some kind of stimulant in there. It was a bright purple powder, and she gave me a bag of it, but the size of like a large sandwich bag, and it was filled with this powder, and all you needed to take was a cap of it. So I was giving away to all my friends and this and that, and everyone loved this. My phone would ring off the hook. And I remember being so messed up on it that at the time, where I was going to school in Burnaby, and I lived near Metrotown at this stage. And I was so messed up that I would get off on the stop either before Metrotown or the one after, and I was just going back and forth. I probably took the SkyTrain past my stop at least 4 or 5 times. I was that out of it. And but this woman was strange. Like, she was a strange woman. Like, she was attractive but very intense. She wore heavy black eyeshadow, I remember, all the time. Very witchy. Like, she was into weird stuff and weird superstitions, like she had a thick accent. I asked her once how old she was, and she gave me a death glare, like if that made your blood ran cold. And then just out of nowhere, she just left, right? She just poof, gone, right? Packed up and left. I don't know, maybe because she was dealing heavy drugs and heat was on her and stuff like that. But she was a strange woman, but fascinating and into a lot of weird stuff. You go to her house, you almost felt like you were in some kind of like spider web, and she was like the Black Widow spider. If a spider was a person, it was she. And again, like, I remember one time I went over there and I was agitated about something. I was really irritated. I was just, acting aggressive and talking about something. She just looks at me and goes, "I don't like the way you're acting." And I'm like, okay. But the way she said it and as her whisper, it kind of put a chill in my spine. She just had this effect of she could just get in your head. And then she goes, "I don't like the way you're acting." And then she gave me a pill. She goes, "I want you to take this." And then stupidly, without even thinking, I take this pill. And I'm on the carpet, I'm so out of it. I'm just instantly rubbing the carpet and rubbing her. I think I gave her a foot massage for about 2 hours straight. That's all I could do. I'm just blob on the carpet, rubbing her feet. And she seemed to really enjoy that. So through her, she was really into raves and underground parties. Of course she was, because she made the drugs for these places. And so I went with her to all these underground places. There was one place called The World, which was kind of funny. It was kind of a funny place because it was a English language school during the day, and then at nighttime it was an after hours party place. They didn't serve alcohol, but everyone did heavy drugs there, especially ecstasy and drugs like that, right? So she loved going to that place. That place was open late, 4 or 5 in the morning. So we'd go to places like that with her. She was really into all these really intense, in some of the scenes, man, it just, again, it was a time in my life, especially with the ecstasy and that I was taking a lot of back then, that there was many situations where I just felt way too high to be in public and so far out of my element, way out of my element. And you're seeing again in the 2000s, and I remember around 2011, right? 9/11. People were in a weird headspace too. You got to remember, because we're in the pandemic, but back then it was war on terror and anthrax and George W. Bush and all the different wars and Bin Laden. It freaked people out, and a lot of people just thought, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna party and and so it had that effect on people. So people were really, like, I think maybe getting more wasted and indulging than they probably would have. I definitely felt that, and it was a strange time in Vancouver. Again, the club drugs were really big. Like, there was a lot of like ecstasy around the city, or there's always lots of cocaine, especially then there was. But there was no fentanyl, there was no poisonous drugs, so people felt pretty safe about indulging. People, now it's a whole different circumstance, right? But back then, there was a comfort level that people, the worst thing that could happen is that you got sold either fake drugs or very weak drugs. And with this woman, her drugs were just like, next level, right? So she was very popular, if you can imagine, right? The amount of partying that I was doing, the late nights, the not taking care, it started to have like a mental toll on me. I was starting to get the effects of depression, anxiety. I would get into these dark moods, and I really didn't like it. So it was one of the first times where I started getting concerned, like, is alcohol becoming a problem in my life? Is it getting out of control, right? So when I would feel that way, I would stop, and I stopped seeing her. I ended up leaving town anyways, because again, with her, it was all this weird drugs and weirdness and weird music and weird parties and weird people, like weird and drugs, right? And I think what it does too, it has like an effect on your psyche when you're in an environment that you're not comfortable with, but you're only in these environments because you're high as a kite. And when you sober up from it, it has a very unsettling effect on yourself, right? And it started to do this with me. And again, I was pretty much a health conscious person most of my life. And, some of these drugs, when you're like up all night doing these chemical party drugs, the detox is pretty vicious. And I had a situation once, and this was like a really bad scare. It was like the first time I ever did drugs where it got scary. I was up for 24 plus hours, maybe even like 2 days, doing lots of ecstasy. And I went to my bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I could not see my face. Like, my face was just like blank skin, and it freaked me out really bad. So I started doing detoxing. I started going to the sauna. I started working out. I started cleaning myself up and stuff. And I was still doing my computer studies, but around this time was the first .com bust. So a lot of the people that I knew that was a little bit ahead of the curve, that already got their training, took all their computer program, they got these really great jobs. They all were unemployed because it was the first .com burst. Anything with a .com, like back in those days, you just had to create a website, and it was a big deal. Oh, I'm gonna create a website for pets, or a website for cars, or whatever, right? It was like the gold rush, right? So it was the first .com burst. So I was pissed, right? So I did all this training, and the only jobs that I would get offered were adult entertainment companies. Help them with their websites, help them with the graphics and things like that. And I did a couple, and I was just like, I can't do this. So a guy offered me a job. He goes, I'm going to pay you. Remember, I'm living on my own. I need money. I've been in school. I traveled for almost 2.5 years, right? This guy goes, I'm going to pay you $2,000 to do a website for me. And I'm thinking, wow, yeah, $2,000. I can use $2,000. And he says, well, what's the website? Oh, it's an adult website. I'm like, no big deal, And he goes, okay, I'm going to send you a file of photos, and then what I want you to do is put them and make galleries out of them. Because back that time, there wasn't a lot of streaming yet. This is before even YouTube or anything like that. So this is before about 2005. So this is still early 2000s. People would go on adult websites, and mostly they would look at actual photographs. There was some streaming, but it was really slow, and they weren't long. So anyways, sends me a picture. He sends me the file. It's on a server, so I have to download it from a server, right? Because that's how you do it. Big files went on servers, and you'd go on the server and you'd, download it that way. It is 30,000 photos of male genitalia. And the website is called COCKBALLS, cock and balls. And I'm like, oh, you didn't tell me this one. So 30,000 pictures of every variety, every size, every shape, every circumcise. And for a week, I had to categorize them all. And got to the point where it didn't even faze me anymore. Like, people would come over and look at my computer like, what the hell are you doing? And I'd just be like, yeah, making this website. After a while, it's like looking at shoes, right? But I knew in my mind that, hey, I can't be doing this like for the next 4 or 5 or 10 years, right? Because, again, not what I signed up for. Amusing to do it once or twice, but anyways. So another adult company calls me up and says, oh, we need some graphic designers. And I said, sure, can you come to our office? I'm like, okay. So I go to their office. It was downtown Vancouver. It was on Beatty Street. And so in the office, this bad vibe, right? Everyone just looks intense and scowly. No one's really friendly. And there's a woman who interviewing me, right? Remember, this is for graphic design. And she says, okay, well, I'll give you some photos, and then, let me see what you can do with them, and I'll let you know, right? And she's like, this woman is like black hair, short hair, big, tall, probably at least 5'10", 250 pounds. And, but she was pleasant, she was professional. And I make some photos, like I do some graphic designs of their website, and the website was called Mistress Pain or something. It was some female dominatrix, not the woman I met, but she kind of had that dominatrix type of vibe to her, right? And I go on the website, I'm like, holy Christ, like, wow, like, just, dudes being tied up and beaten, and, beaten with sticks and canes and whipped, and, pretty intense stuff. Like, I'm sure there's people into that kind of stuff. I'm not into pain. I'm not into giving pain. I'm not into receiving pain. I know a lot of people like that kind of thing. Not for me, right? So I'm just like, whoa, like, again, just so far out of my element, right? But anyway, so I make some graphics, I go there, I hand them over. She seems kind of like, she didn't seem thrilled by them, but she didn't seem not to like them, just very kind of, right, okay, well, I'll let you know what, okay. So 2 or 3 days later, I get this call from this guy, and he's the graphic designer there, and he's just a conversation that's kind of like, I don't know what the point of the conversation is. I'm like, listen, either you want to hire me or you don't. Like, this is just going on too far, all this back and forth and going to the office twice now. Do you want to use me? Do you don't? I don't care. If you don't, just let me know, that I can be on my way. Having this weird conversation with their in-house graphic designer, and he's like quizzing me on all the different specs and this or that. It's almost like just, I don't know, maybe in his mind, just his way of vetting me if I'm a real graphic designer. I don't know. Kind of irritated by the guy. Just kind of thought he was a bit of a loser, to be honest with you. So I was kind of irritated. I'm just like, you know what? F this company. I don't want nothing to do with them. They're just wasting my time. So the woman called, the one that I met with, right? Kind of looked a little dominatrixy. She's wearing I remember she was wearing like those really thick black heels with the really thick, like the thick soles, and her whole gear just kind of had screamed like Miss Dominatrix herself. But I didn't see her in any of the videos, right, or the pictures. So she goes, "Hey, we're really short on some talent. Would you be into us, taking some photos of you?" And I'm like, "Taking photos of me?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, what the hell?" And she goes, "Yeah, we need someone. We're just short on talent." And then she says this lovely little thing. She says, "Oh, don't worry. The welts and the bruises, they'll fade away in a couple of weeks." I'm like, "Welts and bruises?" I go, "What are you talking about?" "Oh, we need someone. We need a male model to be in our next shoot." And Mistress Payne, or pretty sure that was her name. "Oh, and she thought that you would be great." And I'm like, "I don't remember seeing her anywhere." Like, whatever. Okay, so I'm gonna be tied up for how many hours? I don't know. So let's just speculate 2 or 3, right? Tied up for at least for the afternoon. Naked, beaten, whipped. And I'm thinking, like, how much this must at least have to pay, at least, like, I'm thinking, like, if they said 10 grand, I might, like, 10 grand would really kind of help me out right now, the way my predicament is, right? It paid $75, and I'm just like, get the fuck out of here. So as soon as I heard $75, I was just like, yeah, nope. And then she became a bitch. She was like, "Well, then forget about doing any graphic design work for him." I go, "You know what? You never wanted me to do graphic design anywhere. This is your ploy. Get me in there. You guys are probably sizing me up through a two-way mirror, because I remember seeing a two-way mirror. And this is your ploy. You can't get people to go in there for $75 to get their crap beaten out of them. No one will do that unless they're into that kind of thing. And those people are probably far and a few in between. Am I correct?" And she's just like, nah. I'm like, you guys are effing scumbags. You guys are scumbags, right? Be honest with people. If you put ads in the paper, I'm sure people would put their hands up for it. But I guess they wanted guys that were physically in good shape and, decent looking and da-da-da-da, right? So this was like their ploy. They put in ads pretending like for jobs, and really they just wanted, some poor victim to have the crap beat out of them for a disgusting website, right? That's not being honest. This kind of stuff. See, the thing is, it's like, I get that people have different genres and tastes, but the whole key thing is it has to be honest. Everyone involved have to be on the same page. If a guy wants to take a picture of a woman and really it's some kind of sadistic kind of rope torture and doesn't tell her till last minute, it's disgusting and dishonest. Just like if it was like me being lured into a trap for graphic design, but the whole intent purpose was, hey, he would look good getting the crap beat out of him on camera. So anyways, I was pretty done with that, and I was kind of a little bit fed up because, again, .com crash, took all this training, and only these sleazy companies were the only ones around that were kind of offering work. So I was pretty frustrated. And my friend of mine, who actually went to school with for graphic design and computer programming, he goes, "Oh, are you good at sales? You seem like to be a good talker and stuff." And I did a lot of kind of sales, working in nightclubs and all the promo stuff I did is kind of like sales, right? "Oh yeah, I think you'll be good. You should work for my dad." And I go, "Well, what does your dad do?" "Oh, my dad's a stockbroker. He's always hiring, always looking for sales guys. It pays pretty good too." And I just heard, "Oh, pays pretty good? Sure, I'm interested." And he goes, "It's really early." I'm thinking, "Oh, really? Like how early?" Like, "Oh, you got to be at the office like 6, 7 in the morning, because stock market hours, they go on Eastern time." And I'm thinking, "Oh, that kind of sucks, but whatever," because I'm used to being up all night, going to raves and hanging out with crazy chemists that cook their own, ecstasy, and thinking like this. I don't know about this early morning stuff, man. But hey, you know what? This web stuff right now in the graphic design is not working out. I'm just getting sick of these, sleazeball companies that are just never straight up with you, So I said, you know what? Maybe it'll be good. Maybe it'll be something to take me out of my comfort zone. So I said, well, sure, set it up. He goes, okay, I'll call my dad and he will send you an email and go from there. So sure enough, like by the time I even got home from talking to him, there was an email, and it's just very to the point. Be there. It was at 7 o'clock. He wanted me there at 7 o'clock. He goes, you have to wear a tie. I want you in, you have to be wearing polished shoes. He was very specific. I want nicely polished shoes, dress pants, shirt and tie. Be there at 7. So I'm thinking, okay, sure, right? Go to the store. I bought a new tie. I bought a dress shirt. Had the dress shoes, had the pants. Get there at 7 a.m. Get to the office. The office was on Granville Street, Granville and Seymour? Yeah, Seymour. No, sorry, Pender. It was on Granville and Pender Street, right on the corner. The building was an older building called the Rogers Building. It's kind of like a heritage building, but it's kind of nicely kept in shape. So I get there to the office. I just hear people just screaming. I get there and I just hear people screaming on the phone. It's loud. Everyone's shouting at once. I'm like, oh, this is insane. And again, I feel completely out of my element. Everyone's, power dialing, screaming, and I've never met his dad before. And I open the door. And there's a guy, older man, in a suit, really intense, salt and pepper hair. And he puts his hand, oh, you must be Mark, grabs my hand. He goes, okay, come over here. He hands me a piece of paper, and remember, I'm not used to being up this early, and my brain is completely foggy. He barks at me, he goes, read me the script. And I read the script, super lackluster, no enthusiasm, and he just looks at me so disgusted. He goes in his wallet, pulls out a $20 bill, and he goes, I want you to go to Starbucks, and I want you to drink coffee until your stomach hurts, and then comes back. He goes, I don't care, drink 3 cups of coffee if you have to, drink 4. So I go, I have 2, right? And I come back. He goes, gives me the script again. He goes, now read it again. This time I want a little bit more personality into it, And so I just read it as loud and animated as I can. He goes, okay, that's a little bit better. So he sits me down. He hands me a stack of papers. The papers have phone numbers. And he goes, I'm going to show you how to do it, right? He gets a ruler, he puts it on the pieces of paper, and then there's name and phone numbers, right? Hundreds of numbers, right? Stacks of these papers, right? And he goes, I want you to be able to dial 300 numbers by the end of the day, or don't come back. He goes, I'm going to pay you 25 cents a dial. And each call, I want you to underline it and pencil. So he underline it, and then you write on a code, voicemail. If it's a voicemail, don't bother leaving voice messages. Just go to the next call. And when you hold the phone, you hold it between your ear and your shoulder, like kind of right, have the phone there, and you keep your finger on the if these are old phones for you kids, you've probably never seen one of these. These are rotary phones, but this phone actually had a keypad, but it was old, and then you had where the phone where it hangs up. So what you would do is that you would hold the phone between your ear and your shoulder, and then you'd have your finger on the receiver, right? and you dial, you let your finger up, and if someone answered, then you'd grab the phone and then you do your pitch. You want to do 300 calls a day, 25 cents for every call you make. And if someone owns the stock, you underline it in a highlighter, and the people that already own the stock, then the dad or my friend's dad or my boss, he would call those ones. And if those ones sold, if he was able to take those ones as leads, these are the people that actually own the stock, he would try to get them to buy more. And then you got a percentage of that. So this is what this is what we call, this is like the most basic of the basic in a stock boiler room. And you're basically an opener. You're looking for people who own the stock, or also too, if they are interested. And they say, listen, and I wasn't doing any hard selling at this point. I was, green. He didn't expect me to sell anything. All I had to ask them is that, would you be interested in receiving the investment package perspective? And if they were, that also got highlighted, right? And then you'd write that, and those would get sent out. And I believe you got $2 for those. So if you're able to power dial, 300 numbers at 25 cents a number. Oh, also too, he did pay, I think it was $10 an hour. So you got an hourly pay. You got 25 cents for every number you called, $2 for every package, and then you got a percent of a commission for whatever he was able to sell through these leads that you were generating. But you just had to basically power dial all day. So I did that for about a month and a half, because what would happen in these types of jobs, this is later on, is that his dad was a stock broker, but he was also a stock promoter. And what he would do is that he would meet us, he would get the room going, and then he would walk to where the stock exchange was. He would trade, and then when the stock exchange closed, he would come back. And God, if he had a bad day and he came in that office, he was nuts. He would throw bottles against the walls. He would scream and yell and carry on. But if he had a good day, we're off for beers, and we're off, he's going to buy us burgers and beer. So in that first month, just working my ass off, power dialing, and I wanted to be good at it, because I saw people that already were there that were making a lot of money. He got paid every week. I don't think he paid me for the first 2 weeks, because he held back a week or something like that. I don't know. The guy was very odd. He had all these systems, whatever. But there was people that were bringing home $2,000 to $3,000 a week, just doing what I was doing, just power dialing and going, just working as hard as they could. And I think in that first month I made $5,000, and I was just like, wow, I think it was the first time in my adult life that I made more than $4,000 in 1 month. I've had good weeks and stuff like that, but it was the first time having that much money on one paycheck. It was over $5,000. And this is after taxes and things like that too. So getting a check for $5,000, I was hooked. My boss was probably one of the most intense people I've ever met. He was very volatile. He loved to scream and call people shitheads if they ever disagreed with him. He was very but at the same time though, this is very early on. He was possibly the most normal, and at the end of the day, as kooky as he was, he ran a office like a really tight ship. He didn't allow any scoofing around. He had a dress code. You had to wear a tie. He expected you to, he didn't tolerate anyone arriving hungover or anything like that. He ran a tight ship. But, at the same time, he was a solid family man. My friend's dad, he was very, when I met him later on, at his home, he was a very different persona, right? But But yeah, he was pretty intense. He liked to grab the empty water bottles from the cooler, those 8-liter bottles. And if someone ever, had the balls to disagree with him on anything, he would fly into a rage and he'd throw that bottle against the wall as hard as he could, and the thing would just make like a gong, like boom, like it was like a bomb going off against the wall. And then he would scream at that person. He would say, he would scream so intensely that his voice would crack, and he would sound like a 5-year-old like girl having a tantrum. He would scream. He goes, "If you don't like it, get the fuck out of here." Oh God, he was crazy. But I'm going to get into this period of my life. I started working for a bunch of different brokers, and he was actually the most normal one. What would happen in this, so to make things for people to understand is that a lot of the companies that list on the Vancouver Stock Exchange, which doesn't exist anymore, but it's called the TSX Venture Exchange, are mining and resource companies. And what my friend's dad was, he was specialized in promoting these junior mining operations. So these are like companies just trying to get off on the ground floor. They're trying to get equipment. They have a piece of land. I don't know what they're going for, if it's oil, diamonds, whatever it is, right? They have a geologist that do these assay reports, and they're raising money. So a lot of the times these are campaigns, right? So his dad was a full-time trader, but then he would also have these rooms, these sales rooms, where he'd be promoting the stocks, mostly in mining. And they would hit a target. So let's say the room or the target was for this company to raise $10 million or whatever number it is, right? So the campaign would be shut down, right? So what would happen as I move forward with this is that you'd make a lot of money in a short time, and then you'd be off work for 2 or 3 weeks. And if you made a lot of money, then hey, it was cool, right? But not all companies were good, and not all stocks were good. So sometimes you're in a situation where it's a total dud. No one wants it. No one, and you don't make any money, right? So you're screwed. So I was trying to get as good as possible so I could get in these opportunities where I can make a lot of money. And so I have seen some crazy offices. Sometimes they were just like people my age throwing together a office, and they're drinking in the office, or doing drugs, or getting hookers at lunchtime. I've seen everything. It was insane. There was one office I worked at. It was on, it's where Brandy's is, right across from Pacific Center. And at the bottom there was a Keg Caesars. They had their office, and these are these guys I worked for. At 1:30, they would start drinking in the office. They would go down to the Keg, have their dinner or whatever, late lunch, start drinking there, and then they would go to Brandy's, and then they'd go to the Swedish Touch on top, in that same building. That was their daily routine every single day. But these guys were savages. Like some of these days, they made like 50 grand in a day. So when they, shut down to take time off, and because they were fine, like they were doing really good, right? Again, they probably didn't have a liver left, but this is what the lifestyle was like for a lot of these offices. So my first office, my friends, there was none of that. There was no drugs in the office or drinking or anything like that. But some of these offices I'd work in, they were completely insane, like absolutely insane. And again, like I was saying, I was developing bad habits, right? I went on a trip across Canada, nightclubs almost every night, drinking, met a kooky girl that made her own ecstasy, so I was abusing that. And And then I'm in an office environment in a stock market industry. I didn't do any of the drugs. I was done with the drugs. But again, you Fridays, man. Fridays you'd start 3 o'clock. You're starting to drink, and then by 12 o'clock at night, you've been drinking since 3 in the afternoon. So it started to take a toll. This kind of push back and forth, right? Trying to be healthy, trying to be clean. Working in these jobs were very alcoholic fueled and crazy wild people making all this money, and it was always like blow off steam, work hard, blow off steam, and had a real push-pull effect on my psyche. In the next podcast, I'm going to break down more of these crazy office environments and get more into that. It's an important thing because and the theme of these podcasts of Vancouver the Beautiful and Ugly is the thread of the thread that goes through this whole theme is all the different contrasts, right? And one of the ugly aspects of Vancouver has always been a bit of a shady place when it comes to scams and frauds and things of that sort. The reason why the Vancouver Stock Exchange no longer exists and became the TSX Venture Exchange is because it was rife with scams and junk bonds and pumps and dumps and just rife with it. And I had a real insider look into that world. Things went on that are just beyond like comprehension. And this is one of the things that I've seen in Vancouver is that it's always been a place that's been very expensive to live and operate in, but it's always been a fun place if you have lots of money. Of course, most places are, but Vancouver's if you have lots of money, it's a different city than when you don't. It's not a fun city to be broken. So what that does, it makes a lot of people chase fast money, and fast money comes at a price. Look at all the grow ops and what the grow ops did, and then that translated into like clandestine drug laboratories, right? Look at what's going on in Hastings Street, the massive drug sales. People are making a lot of money off the misery of those people. We'll get into that another time. But this is another thing too, the financial scams, that was at such a high level. The Vancouver Stock Exchange, ripping people off like just legally and blatantly. And apparently pump and dumps are still around. So that's another inside look I got where, you get these people that are just all about greed, all about ripping people off just so they can do coke, get hookers, blow it on dumb stuff, cars they can't afford. They can barely gas these cars up, driving $100,000 car. I'll give you one example. I worked with a guy. He was actually really good at sales. He was brilliant at sales, but he was a train wreck. A small paycheck for him, and I worked with him quite a bit, was a take-home paycheck of $2,500. That was a small check for him. But Friday would come, we'd go to the pub right away, like at lunchtime usually. Drink till like 6 o'clock in the evening, go home, shower, meet up, go to a nightclub. He'd hit his dealer, he'd buy a whole bunch of, ecstasy or cocaine or whatever he wanted for that evening. He would party all through Sunday and then go to work on Monday asking me, hey, can you lend me $1 for dollar pizza? And he had an M5 BMW that was worth over $100,000. And he would be able to put like maybe $2 just during the week while he was waiting for his next check. I'd see him gas up his M5 BMW, putting $2 at a time in it because he would blow all his money every weekend. And he'd do this. It didn't matter if he had a $5,000 paycheck or a $2,000 one. If he had more money, then he'd go to the casino, for that's he'd go blow a bunch of money at the casino. It was insane. So, and at the end of the day, he's selling stuff that's just basically just ripping people off at this end of the day, right? So again, it at this stage of my life, I was in this torn kind of place. My health was declining from the amount of alcohol I was drinking, the ecstasy that I got a taste for, and I was getting like massive amounts from my friend, a strange chemist, before she left. Like, she would like literally give me bags of it. Like, she had like almost unlimited supplies of it. So I had unlimited amount of drugs when I wanted them. Binge drinking, and I'm doing stuff that's I know it's probably not on the up and up, right? So this is starting to cause depression and anxiety and self-esteem issues, right? So I'm going to get more into that in the next podcast. I am going to shut it down. It's almost 2 a.m. I appreciate you guys so much, and I'm going to talk very quickly about kind of what's in the pipeline. I've been working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes, of course, as you know. So I got a few things that are really exciting. So again, I'm going to keep exploring David's dark world of working for the mafia, the Colombians, all that kind of stuff, right? People seem to be enjoying that series. I'm going to be doing a very in-depth series on Hastings Street. I have people that are like witnesses, people who live down there, other dealers that ran drug lines, people that were advocacy work down there. So it's going to be a multi in-depth series of Hastings Street and people who lived and breathed that street, that living in the downtown east side. I think it's an important series to do, and then I'm going to build on to that as well. Another exciting thing is that as you know, if you've been following my podcast for a while, is that one of the cases that I'm very passionate about is the Lindsay Buziak case. And I had a strange situation happen. Not going to get into it right now, but this situation turned into a blessing in disguise. So I took them all down, and I'm going to start with a clean slate, a new, fresh approach. The first person I want to have a very in-depth interview with, who agreed to do the podcast, is Lindsay Buziak's dad, is Jeff Buziak. So we're going to do a podcast interview together, and he's going to tell you all the important information you should know about that case. So you're getting it from the best source possible. Another very disturbing thing has happened. One of the other cases that I put a lot of effort into trying to find answers is the Tamara Thompson case. Well, apparently her cousin, who made a whole bunch of noise and pretty unhinged, and claimed that he got contacted by the Victoria police and she's alive and she's fine. Well, a month went by and no one else has had any contact with her. You would think, of all this attention that I helped create and all the people who've come forward, I talked to 20 people, 10 of them on the phone, who care about her, who want contact with her, who've had contact with her previously. No one has heard a thing besides his cousin. So I called the Victoria Police Department, and they were actually very polite and very nice to me, very helpful. And they said that they has had nothing in their records as far as reaching out to Tamara or finding her, as far as they are concerned. And they have no records of being in contact with this cousin. And they asked me to ask him who was the detective that made contact with Tamara, what's the case file number, and who's the detective that the cousin spoke with. I sent messages to him, the cousin, haven't heard back, and I don't think I will be hearing back. So we're back to where we're started. So I am thinking deeply, what is the next best approach? And so that is something I will be announcing shortly once I feel I can think of the best approach to take from here, because we're really back at square one. I was happy that she was found, and I took him at his word saying that he was family. And he, on my Facebook account, I had 2 accounts. I have the Vancouver True Crime Facebook page, and then I have What Happened to Tamara Facebook page. He went on every single post, like over 20 posts, and made this big announcement that they're found. So he posted this multiple times, and I think, okay, well, I'm going to take him at his word. That was a month ago. No one's heard anything. I spoke to people back in Victoria. None of them believe it. None of them believe what he has to say. They're highly skeptical. So I said, you know what, the best thing to do? I'll call the Victoria Police Department. And from the conversation I had, no one knows nothing, including the police. So we're back to square one. So it's very heartbreaking. I was hoping that maybe she wasn't doing well mentally, and maybe you know she needed some mental help, with her mental health issues, which I was talked to many people. They all confirmed that she needs to be on medication. So I thought maybe it was something like that, right? So still no Tamara. Very heartbroken about that. So again, I have a bunch of interviews lined up. I'm trying to create more dynamic podcasts for you, the listeners, to enjoy. I have a lot of passion for this stuff. Every minute of my waking day is about trying to come up with the best, entertaining and thought-provoking and stuff that I believe in, right? Helping people, advocating for people that don't have a loud voice like me. And this is what I want to continue doing, and I couldn't do it without you guys, so I appreciate your support. So good morning, good night, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Take care.